The year was 2347 when everything changed for humanity. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes and sent probes into the darkness. They established colonies on distant worlds and spread across a small corner of the galaxy. And then, on a quiet morning on the colony world of New Eden, they finally got their answer. Commander Lisa Morgan stood on the landing platform with her crew, watching the alien ship descend through the clouds. The vessel was unlike anything humans had ever built. It was smooth and silver, with no visible engines or windows. It moved through the air like a living thing, graceful and silent. Beside Lisa stood her communications officer, a young man named Danny Cole. His hands were shaking as he checked the translation equipment for the 100th time. "Relax, Danny," Lisa said quietly. "We've prepared for this moment our entire lives." "I know," Danny replied. "But what if they're hostile? What if they don't like us?" Lisa had no answer for that. She watched the alien ship touch down on the platform and waited. The door of the vessel opened and the aliens emerged. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. But the one who led them was the most striking. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with a body covered in hard black plates like an insect. His head had 4 compound eyes that reflected Lisa's face 1,000 times over. "I am High Arbiter Al of the Galactic Council," the creature said. The translation device around his neck turned his clicking sounds into words that Lisa could understand. "We have been watching your species for some time. You have finally reached a level of development that allows us to make contact." Lisa stepped forward and offered her hand in the traditional human greeting. Al looked at it for a moment, then touched it briefly with one of his clawed appendages. "We welcome you to Earth's territories," Lisa said. "We have many questions." "And we have many answers," Al replied. "But first, we must discuss the terms of your membership in the galactic community." The negotiations took place over the following months. The Galactic Council, Lisa learned, was a governing body made up of 12 different species. They had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They controlled trade routes, settled disputes, and maintained order among the stars. Humanity was being offered a chance to join this community, but there were conditions. "Your species is young," Al explained during one of the meetings. Admiral George Palmer, the commander of Earth's colonial fleet, sat across from him with a frown on his face. "You are aggressive and unpredictable. You have fought wars among yourselves for your entire history. The Council is not certain that you can be trusted." "We've changed," Admiral Palmer said. "We've united, we've put aside our differences." "Perhaps," Al said, "but you must prove this to us. You will be granted provisional membership. You may trade and travel and communicate with other species, but you will accept your place at the bottom of the hierarchy. You will submit to Council authority in all matters of galactic importance." Palmer wanted to refuse, but the politicians back on Earth were desperate to secure humanity's place among the stars. The resources and technology that the Council could offer were beyond anything humans had ever imagined. After weeks of debate, Earth's government agreed to the terms. As a gesture of good faith, the Council made a request. They wanted humanity to send a small group of children to study at the Academy of Worlds on the Council's capital planet. The children would learn galactic customs, languages, and history. They would become ambassadors for their species, bridges between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. "This is a great honor," Al said. "Only the most promising young minds from each species are accepted. Your children will receive the finest education in the galaxy." Admiral Palmer was not comfortable with the idea. There was something in Al's compound eyes that he did not trust, but the decision was not his to make. Earth's government selected 12 children between the ages of 8 and 12 for the program. They were the sons and daughters of diplomats, scientists, and military officers. They were bright and curious and eager for adventure. Among them was a 10-year-old girl named Sophie Grant. She had long brown hair and a smile that could light up a room. Her father, Captain Grant, was a decorated officer who had served under Lisa Morgan during the border conflicts. He had lost his wife to illness 3 years earlier, and Sophie was everything to him. "Are you sure about this?" asked his daughter as they packed her bags. "It's not too late to change your mind." Sophie looked up at him with eyes full of excitement. "Dad, this is the chance of a lifetime. I'll get to meet aliens. I'll get to see other planets. I'll get to learn things that no human has ever learned before." Smiled, but there was worry behind it. "I know, sweetheart. I just wish I could come with you." "I'll be fine," Sophie said. She hugged him tightly. "I'll be back before you know it." The day of departure arrived too quickly. Stood on the platform at the spaceport, watching the Council transport ship prepare for launch. The other parents stood nearby, waving at their children through the windows. Sophie pressed her hand against the glass and smiled at her father. Raised his hand in return, trying to memorize every detail of her face. "I love you," he mouthed. "I love you too," she mouthed back. The ship lifted off the platform and rose into the sky. Watched it grow smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light among the stars. Then it was gone. He stood there for a long time after the other parents had left. A cold feeling had settled in his chest, a feeling that something was wrong. He told himself it was just worry. It was natural for a father to be concerned about his daughter. She would be fine. The Council had promised. But deep down, in a place he did not want to examine too closely, Grant knew that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. In the months that followed, communication with the children was limited. The messages that came through were short and formal, almost as if they had been written by someone else. Sophie told her father that she was learning a lot, that the academy was beautiful, that she had made friends among the other students. But there was something missing from her words. The warmth that had always been there, the excitement and curiosity that had defined her, seemed to have faded away. Filed requests to visit her. All were. "The students are in a critical phase of their education," the Council liaison explained. "Interruptions would be counterproductive." Accepted the explanation because he had no choice, but the cold feeling in his chest never went away. It only grew stronger with each passing day. And far away, in a sterile white laboratory on the Council's capital world, his daughter screamed. 3 years had passed since the children left for the Academy of Worlds. 3 years of silence, of formal messages that said nothing, of requests that were always. Grant had aged a decade in that time. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his eyes had lost their light. He continued to serve in the Navy because it was all he knew how to do, but his heart was no longer in it. Every morning he woke up and checked for messages from Sophie. Every night he went to sleep disappointed. The other parents felt the same way. They had formed a support group that met once a week to share their worries and their hopes. But as time went on, the hopes grew smaller and the worries grew larger. It was a smuggler who finally brought the truth to light. Pete was not the kind of man that would normally associate with. He was rough and loud and operated on the wrong side of the law. He made his living running illegal goods through Council space, bribing officials and evading patrols. But he had contacts in places that most humans could never reach, and he heard things that most humans would never hear. One day, Pete arrived at the naval headquarters on New Eden and asked to speak with Admiral Palmer. He had a data chip in his pocket and a haunted look in his eyes. "I've got something you need to see," Pete said when he was brought into the Admiral's office. Was there too, along with several other officers. "And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." He handed the data chip to Admiral Palmer, who inserted it into the display unit. The screen flickered to life, and the room went silent. The footage showed the inside of a laboratory. It was white and sterile, filled with equipment that no one recognized. Council scientists moved through the space, their alien bodies casting strange shadows on the walls. And on the examination tables, strapped down with metal restraints, were 12 human children. Felt his heart stop. He recognized Sophie immediately. She was thin and pale, her body covered in scars. Her eyes stared at the ceiling with an emptiness that made one to scream. A council scientist approached one of the other children, a boy named who had been selected from the colony on Mars. The scientist held a device that looked like a needle, and he inserted it into his arm without any care or gentleness. The boy screamed in pain, his body thrashing against the restraints. The scientist made a note on his tablet and moved on to the next child. "They're studying them," Pete said quietly. "They've been studying them since day one. The academy was never real. It was just a cover story to get the children." The footage continued. It showed experiments that no sane person would perform on another living being. It showed pain and terror and despair. It showed council officials watching through windows, taking notes, discussing results as if the screaming children were nothing more than animals in a cage. Watched it all. He did not look away. He forced himself to see every moment, every wound, every tear on his daughter's face. When the footage ended, the room was silent. Admiral Palmer sat with his head in his hands. The other officers looked like they might be sick. Stood up slowly. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "How long have they been doing this?" he asked. "The entire 3 years," Pete replied. "My contact works in the medical wing. She's been gathering evidence for months. The council wanted to understand human biology, our strengths, our weaknesses, how much pain we can endure before we break. They were never planning to give the children back." "Why?" Admiral Palmer asked. "Why would they do this?" Pete shook his head. "Because they're afraid of us. They've read our history, seen our wars, studied our weapons. They know that we're dangerous. They wanted to find out how to control us, or how to destroy us." Walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his daughter was suffering. She had been suffering for 3 years while he sat here, helpless, believing the lies he had been told. "We have to get them back," he said. "The council will never allow it," Admiral Palmer replied. "If we try to take the children by force, they'll consider it an act of war." Turned around. His eyes burned with a fire that had not been there before. "Then we go to war." Admiral Palmer contacted Earth immediately. Within hours, a secure transmission was sent to every government leader on the planet. The footage was shown to presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and scholars. The reaction was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. People poured into the streets on every colony, on every station, on Earth itself. They demanded action. They demanded justice. They demanded that their children be brought home. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were converted to military production. Scientists dropped their research and focused on weapons development. Engineers worked around the clock to build ships, weapons, and armor. A rescue mission was authorized within days. The fastest ship in the fleet, the Defiance, was prepared for immediate launch. Grant was among the crew. They traveled to Council space as fast as their engines could carry them. When they arrived at the Academy of Worlds, led the boarding party himself. He moved through the corridors with his weapon raised, searching every room, every chamber, every hidden corner. But the laboratory was empty. The children were gone. A council official met them at the entrance to the facility. He was like Al, with compound eyes that showed no emotion. "The subjects have been relocated," the official said. "They are now council property, and any attempt to retrieve them will be considered an act of war." Stared at the official for a long moment. His finger tightened on the trigger of his weapon. It would be so easy to pull it, to wipe that smug expression off the alien's face. But he did not pull it, not yet. "Tell your council something for me," said quietly. "Tell them that they have made a terrible mistake. Tell them that they have taken something precious from us. And tell them that we are coming to take it back." He turned and walked away, leaving the official standing alone in the empty laboratory. The war was about to begin, and humanity would not stop until every last child was home. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered empires, crushed rebellions, and brought entire civilizations to their knees. They had seen species rise and fall like waves upon a shore. They believed that they understood war better than anyone. They were wrong about humanity. When Grant returned to Earth with the footage from the Council laboratory, it was broadcast on every screen on every human world. Billions of people watched in horror as their children were tortured by the same aliens who had promised them friendship and partnership. President Maria Santos addressed the United Nations Assembly 3 days later. She stood at the podium with red eyes and a voice that trembled with barely controlled rage. 3 years ago, we trusted them, she said. We believed their promises. We gave them our children, our future, our hope, and they betrayed us in a way that words cannot describe. She paused and looked out at the assembled delegates. Every face in the room reflected the same emotion: grief, anger, determination. The Galactic Council believes that we are weak, President Santos continued. They believe that we will accept this atrocity and move on. They believe that we will bow down and submit to their authority. Her voice hardened into steel. They are wrong. We will never accept this. We will never submit. We will bring our children home, and we will make the Council pay for every drop of blood, every tear, every scream that they have caused. The assembly rose to its feet in a standing ovation that lasted for 10 minutes. The Council sent diplomatic envoys to negotiate. High Arbiter Al himself appeared in Admiral Palmer's office, his compound eyes reflecting the Admiral's face with cold indifference. This conflict is unnecessary, Al said. The research program can be terminated. The children can be returned. All we require is certain concessions from your species. What concessions? Admiral Palmer asked. You will surrender your military capabilities. Your warships will be dismantled. Your weapons will be destroyed. You will accept permanent oversight from the Council in all matters of governance and technology. Admiral Palmer laughed. It was not a happy sound. You tortured our children, and now you want us to disarm. Do you think we're stupid? We think you are rational, Al replied. We have 700 warships. You have fewer than 100. We have 12 species under our command. You are alone. The mathematics of this situation are simple. You cannot win. Admiral Palmer leaned forward until his face filled the screen. Let me tell you something about humans, Arbiter. We don't do math when our children are on the line. We don't calculate odds or weigh consequences. We just fight. And we don't stop fighting until we win or we die. He cut the transmission. The war began 3 weeks later. Grant was given command of the First Strike Fleet, a collection of 43 warships that represented the best that humanity had to offer. His executive officer was a woman named Carol Hayes, a veteran of the border conflicts who had a reputation for calm under pressure. The Council has positioned their main fleet at the system, Carol reported as they prepared to launch. 700 ships, mostly heavy cruisers and battleships. They're expecting us to attack head-on. Then we won't attack head-on, replied. Show me the supply lines. Carol brought up a map of Council space. The glowing lines that represented supply routes spread across the display like a spider's web. Their fleet requires a constant supply of fuel, ammunition, and food, said. Without supplies, their ships become floating coffins. We're going to cut those lines. With 43 ships against 700, Carol asked. Smiled, it was not a pleasant smile. We're not going to fight their fleet. We're going to starve it. The First Strike Fleet jumped into Council space and disappeared. For 3 weeks, there was no word from them. The Council searched frantically, sending scout ships to every system, every station, every outpost. They found nothing. Then the attacks began. A fuel depot in the system was destroyed. A communications relay in the sector went silent. A shipyard orbiting a gas giant was reduced to rubble. The attacks came without warning, striking targets that should have been secure, then vanishing before the Council could respond. Grant moved through Council space like a ghost. He used captured technology to bypass security systems. He studied Council tactics and turned them against their creators. He struck where the enemy was weak and fled before they could become strong. The Council's fleet, trapped began to suffer. Ships ran low on fuel and were forced to power down their weapons. Crews went on half rations, then quarter rations. Morale collapsed as soldiers realized that they were being slowly strangled by an enemy they could not see. "Find them," Al screamed at his commanders. "I don't care how many ships it takes, find them and destroy them." But finding the human fleet was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Every time the Council thought they had located their enemy, the humans were already gone. Meanwhile, humanity continued to build. New ships rolled off production lines every day. New weapons were developed and deployed. New soldiers were trained and sent into battle. The other species of the Council began to notice. They who had always been reluctant members of the Alliance, their support entirely. "This is not our war," the ambassador announced. "We will not die for the mistakes of the." They negotiated a separate peace, agreeing to provide no further assistance to the Council in exchange for a promise that human forces would not attack their worlds. One by one, the Council's allies abandoned them. Within 6 months, only 3 species remained loyal to Al's command, and the human fleet continued to grow. Grant sat in his command chair, studying the latest intelligence reports. The children had been moved to a secure facility on the Council's capital world. They were being held underground, protected by the strongest defenses the Council could muster. "We're getting close," Carol said, standing beside him. "Another few months and we'll have enough ships to punch through to the capital." Nodded slowly. He pulled up a photograph on his personal display. It was Sophie, taken the day before she left for the academy. She was smiling, her eyes full of hope and excitement. "Hold on, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's coming." The war had lasted 16 months, and the galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Council had expected a traditional conflict. They had prepared defensive positions, fortified their strongholds, and assembled their fleets in overwhelming numbers. They were ready for a war of attrition, a slow, grinding conflict that their superior resources would inevitably win. But humans did not fight traditional wars. They fought dirty. They fought desperate. They fought like every battle was their last. Grant led his fleet deeper into Council space, leaving destruction in his wake. Supply depots burned. Communication networks went silent. Entire systems were cut off from the rest of the Empire. On the planet, a Council agricultural world, human forces launched a devastating attack. They did not target the population or the cities. Instead, they destroyed the atmospheric processors that kept the planet habitable. Without those processors, the atmosphere would become toxic within weeks. 2 billion civilians would die unless they were evacuated. The Council scrambled to respond. They pulled ships from the front lines to transport civilians. They diverted resources from the war effort to establish refugee camps on other worlds. And all the while, Grant watched and waited. "This is barbaric," High Arbiter Al declared in a broadcast to the galactic community. "Humans are proving themselves to be the monsters we always feared. They target innocent civilians. They destroy worlds. They have no honor, no mercy, no restraint." Admiral Palmer responded with a broadcast of his own. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "You tortured our children," he said simply. "You cut them open while they screamed. You recorded their agony for your archives, and now you call us monsters." He held up a photograph of the human children. their small bodies covered in scars and wounds. This is what you did to them. This is what your scientists did to 10-year-old girls and 8-year-old boys. You have no right to speak of barbarism. You have no right to speak of honor. He lowered the photograph and looked directly into the camera. We will do whatever it takes to bring our children home. If that means burning your worlds, then your worlds will burn. If that means destroying everything you have built, then everything you have built will be destroyed. This is not war. This is justice. The broadcast ended, but its effects continued long after. Throughout the galaxy, species that had remained neutral began to turn against the Council. They had seen the footage of the experiments. They had heard the screams of human children, and they had decided that the Council had gone too far. More allies abandoned Al's cause. They found themselves increasingly isolated, their once mighty empire crumbling around them. Grant pushed forward. His fleet had grown as the war progressed. Captured Council ships were repaired and pressed into service. Human engineers worked around the clock, reverse engineering alien technology and improving upon it. Shield generators that had once been the Council's greatest advantage now protected human vessels. 16 months after the war began, his fleet reached the Council capital world. It was a beautiful planet, covered in vast oceans and towering cities. Billions of beings lived there, going about their daily lives as if the war was something that happened far away. But the war had come to them now. Studied the tactical display. The children were being held in an underground facility on the northern continent. Council forces had surrounded the building with everything they had left. Thousands of soldiers, dozens of vehicles, and shield generators powerful enough to withstand orbital bombardment. "They're threatening to kill the children if we attack," Carol reported, her voice tight with tension. "The Council commander says he'll execute them the moment our troops set foot on the surface." Stared at the display for a long moment. His jaw tightened, and his hands gripped the arms of his command chair. "Does he think that will stop us?" he asked quietly. "Sorry." Turned to look at his executive officer. His eyes were hard as stone. "They've been torturing those children for 3 years. They've cut them open, experimented on them, treated them like animals. And now this commander thinks he can threaten their lives to make us back down." He stood up and walked to the viewport, looking down at the planet below. "Land the Marines. Tell them to take the facility. And tell them that every Council soldier who surrenders will be treated fairly and humanely. Everyone who doesn't will be shown the same mercy that they showed our children." The assault began at dawn. Human descended through the atmosphere like falling stars. Anti-aircraft fire rose to meet them, but the pilots were skilled and determined. They weaved through the barrage, landing their troops at multiple points around the facility. The Marines moved fast. They had trained for this moment for months, studying the layout of the building, memorizing the patrol routes, preparing for every possible scenario. Watched the battle unfold from the command ship. He listened to the reports from the ground commanders, tracking the progress of his troops as they pushed through the outer defenses. "First perimeter breached," Carol reported. "Casualties light. The enemy is falling back to secondary positions." "Tell them to keep pushing," ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Council soldiers fought hard at first, but as word spread of human victories elsewhere, their resolve began to crumble. They had heard the stories of human vengeance, of the burning of the relentless fury of an enemy that would not stop. One by one, they threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Kept his word. Prisoners were disarmed and secured, but they were not harmed. Medical teams treated the wounded, both human and alien. The rules of war were observed, even in the midst of so much anger and pain. Finally, after 6 hours of fighting, the underground chamber was breached. Was on the first shuttle to the surface. He moved through the corridors of the facility with his weapon drawn, his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was cold and dark. Medical equipment lined the walls, and in the center of the room, huddled together on thin mattresses, were 11 human children. They looked up as the door opened, their eyes wide with fear. They had learned that doors opening meant more pain, more experiments, more suffering. Lowered his weapon and stepped forward slowly. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're here to take you home." He scanned the faces of the children, searching for one in particular. And there in the corner, thin and pale and covered in scars, was Sophie. She stared at him for a long moment, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. "Dad," she whispered. Felt tears streaming down his face. He crossed the room and knelt beside his daughter, gathering her gently into his arms. "I'm here, sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm here, and I'm never letting you go again." The Galactic Council surrendered 3 days after the rescue of the children. There were no negotiations, no conditions, no attempts to salvage what remained of their power. They simply surrendered, unconditionally and completely. High Arbiter Al was arrested, along with every official who had been involved in the research program. They were brought before a tribunal made up of representatives from every species in the galaxy, including humanity. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Evidence was presented, testimony was given, and the truth was laid bare for all to see. The council had authorized the experiments from the beginning. They had known exactly what was being done to the human children. They had approved it, funded it, and protected those who carried it out. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Al and his fellow conspirators were executed in the public square of the capital city. Grant was offered the honor of carrying out the sentence, but he refused. "I came here to save my daughter," he said, "not to become an executioner." The Galactic Council was dissolved. In its place, a new governing body was established called the Galactic Assembly. Every species would have an equal voice. Every species would have equal rights. And no one would ever again be allowed to treat another being the way the Council had treated those children. Humanity was offered a founding seat on the Assembly. President Santos accepted on behalf of Earth, but she made one thing clear in her acceptance speech. "We do not want power," she said. "We do not want revenge. We want only to live in peace, to raise our children without fear, and to ensure that what happened to our sons and daughters never happens to anyone else." The children returned to Earth as heroes, but they did not feel like heroes. They had been through something that no child should ever experience. The scars on their bodies were visible, but the scars on their souls went much deeper. Sophie Grant spent her first night back on Earth in a hospital bed. Doctors examined her, treated her wounds, and gave her medications to help her sleep. But sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that laboratory, strapped to a table, waiting for the pain to begin. Sat beside her bed all night, holding her hand. He did not sleep either. He was afraid that if he looked away, even for a moment, she might disappear again. "Dad," Sophie said softly in the darkness. "I'm here, sweetheart. I didn't think you would come. I waited and waited, but after a while I stopped believing. I thought you had forgotten about me." Felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. He squeezed her hand gently. "I never forgot about you. Not for 1 second. There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think about you, pray for you, fight for you. But it took so long. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I couldn't get to you sooner. But I'm here now. And I promise you on everything that I am that I will never let anyone hurt you again." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she rolled over and pressed herself against her father's side, the way she used to do when she was little and had a nightmare. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in the universe." The months that followed were difficult. Sophie struggled with nightmares, with fear, with memories that would not go away. She had trouble connecting with other children her age who could not understand what she had been through. But slowly, gradually, she began to heal. Retired from the Navy to be with his daughter, he had spent 3 years fighting to bring her home, and now his only mission was to help her find her way back to herself. They moved to a small house in the mountains of Colorado, far from cities and crowds and anything that might remind Sophie of the laboratory. They went for walks in the forest. They planted a garden. They adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, who followed Sophie everywhere and seemed to know when she needed comfort. One evening, almost a year after the rescue, Sophie sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold. "Dad," Sophie said. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think they'll ever forgive us? The aliens, I mean, for what we did during the war?" Considered the question carefully. He had thought about it many times himself. The burning of, the destruction of the supply lines, the lives that had been lost on both sides. "Some of them might," he said finally. "Others probably won't, but that's not really what matters." "What does matter?" Put his arm around his daughter and pulled her close. "What matters is that when they hurt you, we didn't look away. We didn't accept it. We didn't pretend it wasn't happening. We fought for you, every single one of us. And maybe because of that, no one in the galaxy will ever do something like this again." Sophie leaned her head against her father's shoulder. Buddy padded over and rested his head on her knee. "I used to dream about this," Sophie said quietly. "When I was in the laboratory, when everything hurt and I wanted to give up, I used to imagine sitting here with you, watching the sunset, feeling safe. And now—" Sophie smiled. It was small and fragile, but it was real. "Now it's not a dream anymore." They sat together in silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Somewhere out there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the solar system, beyond the limits of human exploration, the galaxy continued to spin. Other species were watching humanity now. They had seen what happened when human children were threatened. They had learned a lesson that would echo through history for generations to come. Humanity was not a species to be taken lightly. They were fierce and loyal and protective of their own. They would fight against impossible odds. They would sacrifice everything for those they loved. They would burn worlds to bring their children home. And God help anyone who forgot it. Looked up at the stars and thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead, new threats, new dangers. But for now, in this moment, his daughter was safe. She was healing. She was home. And that was enough. "Come on," he said, standing up and offering Sophie his hand. "Let's go inside. I'll make us some hot chocolate." Sophie took his hand and smiled up at him. "With marshmallows." "With marshmallows." They walked into the house together, leaving the darkness behind them. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a message echoed through the stars. A warning, a promise, a truth that would never be forgotten. Never hurt a human child. Because humanity will burn the galaxy to get them back.